So, Mina, we have seen the 15-page report from Sue L. Robinson this morning. We know the bottom line is 6-game suspension. We've heard from Brown's ownership. We've heard from Kevin Stefanski. How would you react to the events of today and everything that we have digested since, 8 or 9 hours ago?
Well, I guess first I have the same question for Kevin Stefanski, or similar one that I had for the Haslams, which is, if you respect the process and the findings, which were, to remind people, Sue Robinson, the judge, agreed that the NFL had presented sufficient evidence that Deshaun Watson had engaged in unwanted touching, sexual assault by a certain definition had taken place. How do you feel about that? Are you comfortable with him being the face of the franchise? Do you believe the report? But then it moves forward to what he said, which is the next stage of this process, which is the NFL's decision whether or not to appeal, and then ultimately Roger Goodell or someone working for him making a decision as to whether or not the suspension should be greater. Field, there's a couple ways of looking at this. There's the legalistic interpretation, which is, I think, what Judge Robinson did in deciding 6 games, leaning on precedent, as you said, a system that many people were not happy with as it pertains to personal conduct, in particular sexual assault, domestic violence. And then there's the human reaction. Calvin Ridley was trending on Twitter today, and I understand that it's not one for one, that he was caught doing, gambling, but it's so hard to square his 1-year suspension with this. It's so hard to square this with players being suspended far more for smoking pot or engaging in, financial crimes. I don't even remember the Michael Kendricks case. It's just hard to take in, I think, for the public. And I have to think, when Roger Goodell considers this, and it is ultimately up to him to set precedent, he's probably going to take all of that into account because, frankly, he has to.
The NFL rules are set up, like it or not, where basically they come down harder on players who are caught gambling or taking steroids than they do players who are involved in sexual assault. That's the way the league has designed its system. It's out of whack. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't work. But that's what the rules have been. They've been antiquated and out of date. And the league obviously got caught in situations where it made rulings that it regretted, that they came under fire for. And that's why the league got out of that business and turned over matters like this to the judge. And that's why the league is in such a bad position right now, because either it has to go back to ruling on these particular situations with Roger Goodell as the appeals officer or his designee, or it has to defer to Sue Robinson and say, we find this behavior that we thought was worthy of an indefinite, lengthy suspension acceptable despite the fact that the judge ruled in our favor. So either way, the league faces a very difficult, trying decision that I'm sure that they're debating over on Park Avenue the best way to attack it right now.
Well, great opportunity for the league then. And it's a great
right?
opportunity for Roger Goodell. And I would encourage them to use this situation or moment as an opportunity to rectify the things that Schefter points out. I think 2 things I'm looking forward to are, does the NFL do that? And then the second thing is when Coach Kevin Stefanski says Deshaun Watson is going to have to speak for himself. I don't want to hear Deshaun talk. I think a real man does not use his position of power to intimidate anybody else. And I think it's the opportunity for him to reject that. I think it's the opportunity for him to accept some form of responsibility for this. And I think it's an opportunity for him to lead in this horrific moment that he was in some way associated with, whether you believe it or not. And if you're a real man, that's what you do.
Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.